Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Miracle Mommies Network, where we reignite hope one testimony at a time. This podcast is something that God literally placed on my heart to do this year. And I've always known that there was a purpose for my fertility journey that was greater than myself, but I definitely did not imagine that it would look like this to actually walk in that purpose. Nonetheless, here we are. Hello. The purpose of this podcast is pretty simple. We're here to be vulnerable and share our testimonies to provide hope for all the aspiring miracle mommies out there. Fertility struggles, baby loss, and just the roller coaster that is the transition into motherhood is something that women, especially Black women, tend to suffer through in silence. And we're here today to break that silence and remove the shame and stigma associated with these issues. Now, before we get started, I think it's really important to just issue a trigger warning for this particular episode because we are going to be talking about baby loss. So if you don't feel that you're in a mental or emotional place that you can handle this conversation, sis, there is no shame in sitting this one out. Also, just know that we are unapologetically free to drop J bombs up, round, in here. And by J, I mean Jesus. And you can't just say Jesus regular. You got to say it with your chest, put a little emphasis on it. Oh my gosh, I'm hitting my mic. Anyway, Jesus. That being said, in Psalms 34:5, it says, "Those who look to him are radiant and their faces are never covered in shame." And my prayer today is just that we all leave this moment that we're about to have together radiant. That being said, I have the honor and privilege of introducing our special guest today. Her name is Mrs. Alicia Anderson, who I met actually my freshman year of college. Shout out to all the rattlers out there.
Yeah.
I've had the privilege of watching her journey from afar, mainly through social media. And all I can say is that she's really a shining example of someone who has allowed God to transform her pain into power. I'm actually going to allow her to introduce herself. So, Alicia, go ahead and say hi to the people. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Again, thank you, Chrissy, for having me. I am so honored to be here. I am Alicia Anderson, as she said. I go by Ali Andy on social media. And I am a little bit of everything. I am a stay-at-home mom in this season of my life.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Mhm.
so I have two living children who are 7 and 4, two boys. So I am a boy mom. And then I am also a stillbirth survivor. We'll talk about that a little bit later today, but of my son DJ. And I also am a baby loss, pregnancy and infant loss advocate. I support lost parents through an organization that I work with, that I do support groups for BIPOC communities. And I recently just got my coaching certificate for baby loss
Ooh,
coaching.
I'm here for it.
We'll be taking some new clients in the new year, but just honored that God has used me in this way to just share my story and to be a resource for other lost families that may be going through this grief journey. So honored to be here.
Amen to that. That is amazing. And I'm so excited for what the future holds for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. It's been a road.
No
It's been a road.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I mean, I
Absolutely.
guess the best place to start would be for you to just kind of tell us about your baby story.
Absolutely. So I always, whenever I get this question, I always start with my story of how I met my husband because it kind of plays a little piece into how we moved about into trying to start our family. So I met my husband at an internship in 2007. And I didn't think I would ever see this man again after 10 weeks. I was like, he was so kind. We built a very great friendship over those 10 weeks. So I was like, I will never see him again. We are in like two different states, go to two different schools from two different parts of the country. And lo and behold, the Lord was like, girl, psych, psych. So we ended up staying in contact like every day after our internship. And so we ended up making it official, and we ended up dating long distance for 4 years. So we never lived in the same place until we got married in June of 2012. And so from there, it was like people would ask me like, okay, when are you gonna start a family? Like as soon as we got married, when do you guys want kids?
Yep,
And
the questions always start.
not yet. I just want to enjoy my
Right.
be in the same house in the same state.
Yeah, can I be married first? Can I
Please.
please?
So we were married for 3 years before we even considered children. And we knew we wanted children, but it was just like, we'll wait. And so when we were finally ready, I asked my doctor, like, how long does this take? I don't know what to expect. And she's like, give us about a year to get pregnant. So I'm like, okay. And literally the next month I got pregnant. So I was like, okay, weather ready. I don't think you're ever ready, but
No.
so when we got pregnant, we were ecstatic, of course. And the thing is we kept it quiet for a while. So like we didn't I don't think we told many people. And so like we waited. I don't know where we got information about like waiting that first trimester to make sure everything's okay, but we did that. And so we were like, oh, we're in the clear. We made it past 12 weeks. We're good. And we were good. Like we did our announcement, everybody was excited. And then fast forward to our 28-week appointment where they test you for your gestational diabetes. And so I went in, just routine appointment. They gave me that drink, and she's like, while we wait, I know, boo. While we're waiting for like the drink, to do its thing, the sonographer was like, well, I'll just pull you back and we'll do an ultrasound just to check on baby. She's all excited. And so we were so excited to see him because we hadn't seen him since our 20-week appointment where we found out his gender. And so get in there. And I just remember, like, I literally can remember this like yesterday. It was in 2015. It was a Friday. And so she gets me back. My husband was there. She gets the gel on my belly. She's, doing her scan. And I just remember her all saying, like, you don't have a lot of fluid around the baby. And as a first time mom, I was just like, okay, like
Right.
what's going on with our appointment? And I'm just like, yep, okay, I'll, drink more water. We'll figure it out, at the end of the appointment. What do I need to do to ensure that he's okay? And she just kept saying it. And then she's like, I'm gonna go get the doctor. And that's when I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what, per se. And so she came back and she's like, okay, I need you guys to follow me across the hall. And there was my doctor and a nurse practitioner waiting. So I was like, uh-oh, what is happening? And so they're like, we're so sorry, but your baby doesn't have a heartbeat. And I was just like, what is happening? Like it literally felt like the record scratched, like everything stopped. So they're like, we'll give you a minute. We're gonna, get out the room for a second just so you can process. And I literally screamed like a gut scream. Just never heard that before from myself. And my husband's just like there trying to comfort me. And when they came back in, my husband was just kind of like taking the lead. So he's like, okay, what's next? What does this mean? And they were like, well, you can have the baby today, or you can go home. You can wait till your body kind of does its own thing, or we can induce you sometime this weekend. So we chose to be induced. And then we went home, and to this day don't know how I drove home. I was like in tears. My mind was in a fog. I drove separate than my husband. He always used to meet me at my appointment. So it was just like, thank God, a short, like 15-minute ride. But I mean, everything just was blank from that conversation on. And I just remember us getting home and my husband saying, okay, we need to call our parents. And so thank God again for my husband who put on his Papa Bear hat, called all our family, and it was just such a sad time because everybody was so excited. Like, what happened at the appointment? And we're like, sorry to say, but the baby died, So
Yeah.
literally felt like we were setting off bombs literally every phone call.
Every
It was
phone call. Mm.
horrible. Um, and the one thing that since, we said we will talk about Jesus, when I say God was so pivotal in this beginning stage of my journey, I remember I always used to love to write in my journal, and so I wrote down, like, what happened because I was like, "I have to make this make sense in my mind." So I just literally wrote down, like, "This is what happened at this appointment, and they said I have to come in and get induced tomorrow, and I don't think I can do it," and I just said, "God, please give me peace," and I remember vividly writing that. Um, and so fast forward to the next day, we go in, we get induced, and from the moment I stepped into that hospital, I know for sure, looking back at my story, that God was there.
Mm.
He literally, when I walked in, they had my name already ready. So, like, I got there, they were like, "We have a room for you." On the corner, it was literally, I didn't see any pregnant people while I was waiting. They took me back. They had this picture of a fallen leaf on the door. And so that represented that you were dealing with a mom that had a loss. And so every person that entered my room came in with a reverence that is what I was experiencing at the time. And so they treated me with a bit more care, which I truly appreciated. Um, and I think from that moment I got in, there was a nurse that just hugged me and she was like, "You're gonna get through this. God is gonna get you through this." And from there, I mean, I literally felt like I was in this incubated bubble that God had crafted just for me. And I was there 3 days and I met this nurse who I still talk to this day. And she just really took a liking to my husband and I. And so she was there on day 1, she was off day 2, and when she came back on day 3, I still hadn't had the baby yet. And so she asked for me personally, could she have us as her patients for that day? And when I say she was absolutely phenomenal, I could not have asked for a better support in that time. My mom ended up flying down, so she was also there with us. And between her, myself, and my husband, we rave about this nurse to this day because she was just so thoughtful in how she cared for me. She really kind of laid out what would happen. So she's like, when your baby comes, because I had to deliver him, so he was a baby that I can hold in my hands. He was 1 pound, I think he was like 12 ounces or something like that, 12 inches long. And when I wasn't sure if I was gonna see him at first, but he ended up, I was like, "I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it," from some coaching of a friend that I had who had a cousin who had a stillbirth, and
Mm.
the nurse actually was like, "You can take pictures, you can hold them, we can wash them," like all the things we would do with a baby, and so we opted to do all those things, and I am so grateful because
Wow.
especially for the pictures, because that's like that one piece that I have of him that is always there. Something that you can't put a price on. So it was just an amazing thing. And before I left the hospital, that same nurse told us, she talked to us about grief. She talked to us about if you needed help, how to seek help through therapy or counseling. She talked about how men and women grieve differently and how to give each other grace. I mean, she was just
Wow.
a godsend. And I know this is not most people's
Oh, yeah. By far, this is not most people's journey.
experience.
That is
I say the
amazing.
peace of God. When I wrote that down, to see that come to fruition literally in 24 hours was just something. Yeah.
Yeah, that is wow, that is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Man, God be guiding, I'm just saying.
He really does. He's like, "Girl, I know this sucks, but I'm gonna give you a little something." Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Always, always. So it's good that you got to talk about the nurse who kind of helped you through the process.
Mhm.
What was your overall perspective on the care that you received, like in the hospital and after?
I thought for what it was that they did a great job. And again, I know this is not most people's experience, especially Black women. So I do want to acknowledge that. Um, but for my case, I do think that I got great care. They gave us resources. They even gave my husband and my mom additional resources. They gave me books to read. I just felt like, okay, I'm like for what it was, they were very kind to me and my family. And I felt like leaving the hospital, I was like leaving my safety. And when I went into the world, that's when like real life and real grief hit. But in the hospital, I felt safe. I felt like it was a safe space.
That's so good. And shout out to the hospital and the staff for creating that safe space for you.
Yes.
Wow. Man, that is a whirlwind. And so when you got home, like kind of how did you how did you ease back into your life? I know that's a loaded question,
Oh,
but
it was so hard, and I think this is when and I always tell especially people who are believers in Christ, I tell them that it is so important that when you're going through these rough patches, when that doubt starts to creep in about like, "God, why would you let this happen to me?" Like, I felt like for most of my life, things have worked out in some way or another. Like, the things that I wanted, I pretty much got, you know? And so this one thing, it felt like my world had crumbled, and I really questioned like, "God, why? Why would you do this to me? Like, I've done it. I did it the right way." You said, people are like, "Go to school, get a job, get married, have a family." I did that. And for me to do everything quote unquote right and this be my outcome for my first baby that I'm so excited to welcome, I had some very serious conversations with God. And for a little bit of context, my dad is a pastor. So I literally grew up in church, literally, like from 6 on. Um, and so, I knew about like the character of God, but I was so upset. And I remember just again asking why. But I also remember when I was crying my eyes out at night, again, I just felt that peace of God. So even though I say me and God were beefing on my end, I felt like he was like, "Girl, I'm still gonna offer you a soft place to land," and that I learned about like God's grace because I feel like He truly like even in my anger, He still was the one that I could depend on because I was like, I feel like I'm losing it. I felt like grief was just so heavy and I hadn't experienced a loss that deep. And so I just felt like a fish out of water. And I truly do believe that God like is the one that withheld me in that season of just being like, what is this? What is life? I don't know how I'm gonna make it. And I remember telling my husband, like, I don't think I'm okay. I don't know what that means, but I know I'm not myself. And so he's the one that suggested, like, let's see if we can find you some help. And at the time I was actually back in school, studying to get a second bachelor's degree. And so it was my senior year going into my last semester, and I remember going to my counseling, department at the school, and they were just like, "We have free counseling for students, so you can get 10 sessions for free." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember my counselor, this is again another God moment in the story. My counselor was like, I've never had a loss, but I had a cousin who did. And one thing that I want you to know is that you can honor your baby however you like, even though they're not here. And so she's the one that kind of made me feel okay with sharing my story. And that's
Wow.
where my ease of talking about my story came from. So again, like God planted all these little seeds of hope in my journey, even though I was grieving heavily. He still implanted these people in my life at a season that I needed them most, with the nurse and with my counselor. And I mean, I just felt like he always put something there to help me to hang on when I'm just like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. So I appreciate those little, you know, just the download of hope that even if it was a little bit, it helped me get through for sure.
Wow. One time and two times for God in the situation for sure. Because you know what? I always wonder kind of like how people who don't have like faith as a foundation are able to cope with things like this because I don't know where I would be or if I would even still have my right mind if it hadn't been for faith for sure.
I think that by me being a support group facilitator, I've literally seen firsthand how having faith or being faith based, having that foundation can truly change your perspective on your loss. And while I think it is important that everybody find their authentic voice in grief, I do think having a faith foundation is just it changes the landscape of how you see grief. And even when we think about the Bible, like even Jesus wept, as it said, and like there is examples all through the Bible of grief and loss and lament and sadness. So I'm like, when we learn about this, I think our society is so uncomfortable with grief. We don't allow ourselves that space, and especially in church, if I'm gonna be honest,
Oh, yes.
we give ourselves the space. We want to go jump straight to hope, which I think hope is absolutely important. But I also think you have to give yourself space for what grief can bring because grief is a great teacher as well. You don't want grief, but it teaches you so much. And it teaches you love, to be honest. I think that's the biggest thing it's taught me is that I know that I love my child because his absence feels so great. And so there has to be a love deep that would have me crying at night. So I learned that grief is not a bad thing and that we're able to cry and lament and be angry and have the range of emotions. But I think my faith brought me to the hope and the gratefulness and seeing this as something that was a teacher, but it didn't I didn't get that right away. Like this was a true process and it continues to be. So, hold on to that little even if it's a small bit of faith, it goes a long way.
That's so good because oftentimes, especially in the church, like we'll get in Christianese mode and be like, well, we don't grieve as those without hope. And you
Yeah.
throw Christmas at it and we say, you are right. Just
Yeah.
try again. And
Yep.
it's like, no, allow the person to go through their process of
Yes.
grief.
Yes.
Because when you don't cope with those things, you're mentally frozen in that time. And no matter what happens after that, you can't ever mentally move on from that moment until you actually take the time to grieve and feel your feelings.
Absolutely. And like you literally, I always told the people in my support groups, you cannot outrun grief. It will catch up. And when it does, you don't know what it's gonna show up at.
Mhm, mhm.
So it could
That's
be
it.
you down in the middle of a store, you're having a panic attack. Like it's gonna find its way up. It's like it's at the surface, it's just right below the surface, and it's just waiting for you to give it the space. So it's like give yourself that chance to just break. Sometimes the process calls for breaking, and God will put you back together, but you gotta let yourself break because you need to feel and you need to process what happened, and especially to my Black women who we are often taught that you are fine, you can push through it, push past it. And
Mm.
we're strong Black women. We wear the cape, Black girl magic, all the things, which we are, but also we are fragile. And I heard somebody say, I don't want to be strong. I want to be treated like I'm fragile because people that see something fragile treat it with care.
Care.
And
Yes.
you have to be treated with care in this process because it hurts. It's literally like you are starting life anew. That person I was when my son died, I am not her. And I had to grieve not only my son, not only his future of what I dreamed it to be, but the woman that held him in her womb. She was gone along with my son. So it's like this is not a just easy fix.
Oh, yes. Such good points. And say all of that louder for the people in the back. We do not have to wear that cape. We do
Take
not
off.
have to be the strong friend. Like, you can take that cape off, sis. It is
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
It was okay.
Yes. Please.
Oh my gosh. So what advice would you give to aspiring all the aspiring miracle mommies out there who are stillbirth survivors?
Oh, the first piece I would say is find your authentic grief voice and sit in that. You don't have to rush to figure out what's next. Like I think people are always like, you can try again. And it's like, can I process the fact that my baby died? Like, and sit with what that means. I know that feels uncomfortable, even to say a baby died, but like sit in what that looks like for you. And then I would say find your community. It is so important that in our grief that we're not isolated. You don't want to be alone in this process. And I think the gift of being a support group facilitator is seeing what community does to grievers. And it truly validates your experience. When you think you're alone, it feels so isolating. But when you can talk about your loss in a community that feels safe, that others understand what you've been through, it unlocks so much. And I've seen so much breakthrough in just the sharing of their babies and being vulnerable and allowing others to hold your baby. Like just to hear people say their baby's names or to tell me their stories and I can see them like light up because it's like if it's like a parent with a living child, like how they show you their kids pictures. Excuse me, but like when lost parents, they typically don't have the space to talk about their babies anywhere else because people are so afraid to upset them or talk about it. And so to have a space where
Mhm.
they are welcome to talk about their baby, talk about the fears, talk about their grief in a way that is accepting. I've seen such breakthrough. So find community if you can. And if you don't know where to look, find me. I'll try to point you to the best place that can serve you. But it's so important not to do this alone. We were not meant to grieve alone. You need a village of support. And that may not be the people you think it may be, but there are people out there that will support you through your loss.
So good. So good. And so how do you what would you say is kind of the effect overall on your relationships, your work life, and even, your relationship with your future, well, then future kids, now current kids?
Mhm.
What
Um,
would you say that was like?
I think because my nurse, as far as my husband, because my nurse talked about what grief looks like with men and women and how it differs, it allowed me to give my husband space to grieve in a way that feels good to him. And that saved us a lot of heartbreak in the grand scheme of things because a lot of couples when loss occurs, it drives them apart because it's so hard to like
Yeah.
voice your it's hard to even say what you're feeling. So to try to understand what another person who, although you've lost the same child, it just it hits differently. One is the person that carried the baby. The other is like, I'm here as a support. So my husband was more worried about me. And I was like, but how do I preserve my son's legacy? Like, and we're like, and of course, as a dad, he grieved things too that I just didn't understand initially.
Mm.
And the thing that really opened my heart to my husband was I wrote a book and I asked my husband to write a chapter from the dad's perspective. And when I read his chapter, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, okay. Like he was like, I love my son. I miss him. I was broken, but dads don't get that space to talk freely about their perspective because most people look at them as just like the support of the mom that lost the baby. Like not that they're a grieving parents, but that they're just somebody that is along for the journey too. And so just knowing that and giving my husband is a man of very few words. So I would always ask like, do you want to talk about DJ? He's like, I'm okay. But like I know like when we celebrate his birthday or thing, like he's always down to do that because he's like, that's my son. And like he was very protective. Even like when I started my social media page, he didn't want me to put his picture up at first. Like, that's my baby. Like, I don't want people to,
Oh,
reject him or, anything like that. But he
yeah.
he had his own feeling and I feel like it brought us closer because we were literally the only ones in the room when he was born besides our nursing staff. And so I feel like that was a shared special moment that just him and I had, like something that no one else would understand but us two in that moment. And I think because we have been so open about talking about DJ, it made introducing him to my children who are living so much easier. It was seamless because like DJ's picture was around my house. And so my son, who was my rainbow baby, when he was like 1 year old, he asked me, "Who's that on your screen, mommy?" I said, "That's your brother. He lives in heaven." And so we've literally had conversations like 1 year old about DJ and we use his name and they see his picture. So now as they're 7 and 4, we talk about him all the time. But literally, my 7 year old was like, "Mommy, I miss DJ." He never met him, but because we've normalized these type of conversations in our house, it's been seamless in how we converse about him.
Wow, that is good. Because a lot of people will bottle that up and like hide everything away and never even tell their children about their, sibling who passed. So that is wow. That is something that you again don't often see with stillbirth survivors.
Yeah, and
That's
it's beautiful to see because I have been so mind blown with how they have built their own relationship with DJ. They like talk about mom, what do you think DJ's doing? Or like, and it's very like random. And I'm like, oh my God, that is so beautiful. Or like, our symbol for DJ is butterflies. And so whenever we see butterfly, we're always like, hi DJ. So we went to this butterfly, like it was like a butterfly. Yeah. And this butterfly landed right on my son's head. And I was like, oh, DJ's giving you a kiss. And it was just like
Oh my
such a
gosh.
beautiful moment. So it's like those little winks that we get. We call them DJ winks. That like just little moments in the day that they're so in tune with like, I miss DJ or what do you think heaven will be like when we get to meet him or stuff like that where it's just like, oh my gosh, you guys are just amazing. So that always like just warms my heart to have that thought of like my kids, all of my kids, um, just have like this little piece of me. So
That's amazing, and that just warms my heart. I just got all the warm fuzzies from that, and
yeah,
wow. Oh,
yes,
how beautiful. And it also, like, gives the kids just a perspective of something to look forward to, when they do see him.
Yeah. That's beautiful to hear.
Yeah. I love that so much.
Thank you.
And so, what would you say is your prayer for the aspiring miracle mommies out there who are coping with a recent stillbirth?
Oh, my prayer is that, again, you're allowed the space to grieve however you see fit. My prayer is that in your grief, that God would hold you um while you're going through this process, but also that you find what makes you passionate about life anew. I always say that, the old you is gone, but that doesn't mean that you cannot cultivate somebody that is amazing. And whether that story includes living children or not, you are complete and you are whole. And God has great things in store for you. It may not seem like it now, it may take years, but He can restore your beauty for your ashes, and it's beautiful to see the process. If I was to see myself 12 years or 8 years ago when my son died, it I would just hug her, because it's like, we didn't think we can do this, and yet here we are now. So God will sustain you is my prayer until you get to that moment when you can look back on your journey with a heart of gratefulness instead of pure sadness.
Amen to that. Oh my goodness. It has been such a pleasure to have you, Alicia. Thank you so much for your yes again. How many women's lives are going to be blessed by this? You just don't even understand.
And I want to say thank you to you for being obedient to God and His call for you to create this platform. It is so important that, especially as Black women, that we continue to tell our stories. And so, for you to create this platform is beautiful, and I absolutely know it will be a blessing to so many. So, thank you, Chrissy, for saying yes to God's call for your life, and for even inviting me or thinking of me to be here.
Thank you. And blessings to you, my friend. This has been such a great interview. And to all of the aspiring miracle mommies out there and those who are loving and supporting them, we will see you next time on the Miracle Mommies Network.
Hey.